Today we're counting down the 15 most overrated champions you should avoid in low elo this season. No, this is not a video from us telling you not to play these champions, because if you are good enough, most of these picks will probably see you climb. If you're better than your rank and you're a beast on these picks, then you should get to where you deserve to be very quickly. However, these champions are mostly choices that are just so much better at higher ranks, for various reasons. So let's break down these reasons throughout this video. Now, if you do want to completely ignore this video and get better at these champions instead, then head over to the Mobalytics app to see their optimal builds and runes and improve your chances of proving me wrong. Now let's start off with the number 15 spot, Graves. When it comes to actually playing Graves properly, you need to know how to maximize the efficiency of your jungle clear at all times. Because playing Graves is all about accumulating a massive experience and gold lead through farming through the jungle, farming ganks as well while there's no camps to farm, and basically obliterating your enemies by just being so far ahead of them. Then it comes to actually fighting as Graves. You need to understand those limits, you need to get up close and personal, and you need to burst down those high priority targets. And quite often when playing Graves in low elo, people just simply don't do this. They sit back as if they're playing an AD carry. And by doing this, they don't play Graves how it's supposed to be played, and they have very little impact in team fights. This even happens in those early ganks when playing Graves, because all your enemies have to do is stay in a minion wave and you're probably not going to be able to auto attack them. This is Graves' biggest weakness, and players in low elo just don't know how to overcome it. Moving on to number 14, which is LeBlanc. Now LeBlanc is one of the funnest, trixiest assassins you can play, but actually she's just not that great in lower ranks. This comes down to one of her biggest weaknesses, which is actually wave clearing and lane control in general. LeBlanc is all about roaming, one-shotting and killing everyone in sight, but if you don't manage the lane at the same time, you're going to get so far behind on golden experience. And before you know it, you're trying to one-shot the enemy AD carry, but you simply just don't have enough damage because you're 2 levels behind them. Another big reason as to why low elo players don't quite function as well on LeBlanc as the higher ones is because of the flexibility and the versatility of her kit, meaning she needs to play dynamically at all times. What I mean by this is, because of her ultimate, she can play every single scenario completely differently, depending on what is the best solution. Sometimes you'll need to play for pick potential by stacking those roots. Sometimes you need maximum AoE damage with your W and your ultimate combo. Sometimes you need to gap close, then pop a single target burst with your Q and your ultimate, and sometimes you need to do a combination of all of the above. And understanding all of these different scenarios and all of these different situations is key to playing LeBlanc effectively, which at lower ranks people don't know how to do quite as often. Aside from that, LeBlanc scales pretty poorly, so you need to make your mark on the game early, with early game aggression, early game one-shotting, early game roaming, and if you don't do that and you get to team fights, you may struggle to make your mark compared to other easier mid lane picks. Next up we have number 13, which is APHELIOS, the first AD carry on this list. APHELIOS is probably the most overwhelming and intimidating champion that you can pick up and play, and his win rate at lower ranks is simply diabolical. APHELIOS is nowhere near as complicated as you may think. All you gotta do is learn those weapon combinations and when to use what. The hardest part is preparing those things for the next fight or the next scenario that you're gonna face. The biggest reason you should actually avoid APHELIOS in low elo though is because of how hard he is to actually play in team fights. It's so easy to get blown up without actually dishing out any damage whatsoever. And aside from Gale Force, he has no tools to help him reposition. So if you don't have the perfect combination of weapons and you don't have the right positioning, you're going to get blown up without using any of your abilities at all. If you really do enjoy APHELIOS, then this is not me telling you not to play him. But if mechanics and positioning is not your strongest suit, there's probably other AD carries you should play instead. Moving on to a support pick now in number 12, which is SENNA. SENNA is all about scaling into a secondary AD carry with crazy attack range and damage. But getting through the lane phase is where it's actually pretty difficult, because you are so squishy one good hook and you are going to get farmed on repeat. Now don't get me wrong, SENNA offers some good tools in lane. She's got poke, she's got sustain, she's got catch with that W2, and she's got a global ultimate to contribute to kills and assists across the map. But the thing is, you are so squishy and you are so slow, so if you do get caught by any type of engage, you're simply just going to die. You need to understand how you can stay alive, still have presence in lane, but also collect those souls and stack that passive at the same time. If you get choked out of farm and experience, if you get choked out of collecting souls, you are simply never going to be relevant. And in comparison to someone else that you could play that offers sustain and poke and damage, there's just no reason to pick SENNA unless you're an absolute beast on it. If you are a beast on her though, and you do get to that late game, this is where you're going to have a lot of fun. You have so much damage and so much range that you're going to be able to attack people from super far away. But just remember, one bad positioning, one mistake, and you're going to die in a matter of seconds. Number 11 on our list is up to the top lane, and it's AATROX. Yes, the ultimate raid boss healing, sustaining, mobility 1v9 top laner is one of the hardest to play against once he gets fed. But the truth is, this guy is the definition of understanding your limits. If you don't play to your limits, you don't understand your damage, you don't understand the amount you heal after killing someone with your ultimate, you don't understand those sweet spots, how to chain those abilities together, then you're simply not going to be relevant whatsoever. If you're playing AATROX in low elo and you're sat under your tower farming and you're not engaging in skirmishes, you're not engaging in fights with your jungler, then you're not doing your job. A big part of the theme and the selection of the champions in this video is having impact, and understanding your champion's role and the ability to have impact in different ways is key to playing the game properly and winning more games. AATROX is all about outplaying his enemies by taking on multiple people at a time, killing one of them, getting some heals off, and killing more and more. Kiting around those abilities, kiting out with your mobility, popping people down one by one, and yeah, you get the point. He's a lot harder to play than you may realise, and that's why he's still viable in high elo, but in low elo, he's not doing so well. Number 10 on our list is back into the jungle, and we have, of course, NIDALEE. NIDALEE is a lot more than just throwing spears, and that's all you're simply going to do if you don't get super fed and destroy the enemy jungler. There are not many more picks in the game that have a bigger divide compared to NIDALEE from low ranks to high ranks. And if all you're doing is walking around in your human form, healing a few people up and lobbing a few spears here and there, then you're simply not playing this champion to its potential. NIDALEE is all about diving in with those Cougar forms, getting resets, jumping over walls to get out, popping spears, getting back into Cougar form, and doing it all over again. And you need to be jacked up on a ton of caffeine to actually be able to play her properly, because you need to constantly be pressing buttons, constantly darting in and out of fights, and snowballing at a ridiculous pace. NIDALEE is all about the early to mid game. She's all about invading, she's all about shutting down the enemy jungler, and she is on a clock because she doesn't scale very well at all. Lower ranking players have a real issue when it comes to closing out games, which is something you simply need to know how to do if you're going to main NIDALEE. Just like plenty of the other champions on this list, if you are good enough at NIDALEE, she will carry you super high super quickly. But just take a step back, take a look at your games and see if you really are playing her properly, because if not, it might be time to try someone else. Next up, in the number 9 position, we have PYKE, another support on the list, and yeah, there's not too much we need to say about this one because I'm sure you've all seen just how crazy those high elo PYKE one tricks are. However, playing him like a scaredy cat in the support role, you're simply not going to be as effective as so many different supports that can just sit there, spam some heals, and win the game so much easier. With PYKE, it starts from level 1 and 2 with those flash hooks and flashies, and as the game progresses, you need to know how to combo your abilities together. You need to know exactly the right time you can use your ultimate to not get blown up instantly, to make sure you get those reset cutoffs, and yeah, he is not easy to play well. To be honest though, there is nothing more satisfying than getting a pentakill with PYKE's ultimate, especially if you've got a cheeky skin under your belt as well. But it really isn't all about his ultimate. Obviously this is going to win you a team fight, but you really need to know how to navigate the lane phase, to snowball the early game, to roam into the mid lane, and constantly have that threat and influence on the game. Back down to another AD carry now in the number 8 position, and it's going to have to be DRAVEN. Now this one is probably the most self-explanatory of the whole video. DRAVEN is a really unique marksman, and it's only really those one tricks that can play him to his full potential. First off, you need to know how to catch those axes religiously. You need to know how to spam that W in every time to get those axes, to chase and to kite. You need to know how to use your E to interrupt gap closers, whether people are escaping or chasing you. You need to know how to time your ultimate to get the maximum amount of damage. You need to know how to reposition it with your flash and your W, and that's just a number of his kit, tips and tricks that you have to learn to just play him at a basic level. But by far the biggest thing about DRAVEN is actually knowing your limits, knowing how much damage you do with each item spike, and using this to destroy enemy bot lanes and win the game every single time at 15 minutes. There is simply just no reason to play DRAVEN if you're not that good at him. He's so average if he's not played perfectly, which means you're literally shooting yourself in the foot by picking him. If you do manage to get those flex games stacked up with your friends, get practicing, get good at him, and then take him back into solo queue, you're going to see a real improvement on your rank if you can apply what you've learned into those games. Number 7 on our list is back in the mid lane with AKALI. She's definitely one of those champions you can flex on with and really show off to your friends if you can play her properly. But actually she's much harder than you realise, and even when it comes down to just laning and farming, it's really not that easy. AKALI has to manage her energy. It's one of the hardest things to actually do properly on her. Trading and farming and clearing at the same time in the early levels can be a bit of a mission, especially against a lane that can harass you and poke you down at the same time. You need to know how to get those minions safely while still trading with your enemy. You need to know how to get that level 6 and be in a position where you can kill your enemy and start snowballing sooner rather than later. And then after that, it's all about roaming around the map, jumping into team fights with those big flanks, and one-shotting enemy carries every time they try and kill you. The problem is, low elo players can't do all of the above. And if you don't even do the first thing right when it comes to laning and trading, you're never going to get going. Every single time you miss a CS, every single time you miss that level 6 power spike, you instantly make this champion far more average. If you do really want to play AKALI properly, spend some time in practice mode, get that laning and trading down, spend some time to understand your energy management with your W, spend some time learning those combos with your ultimate and your E, and then take it into ranked. Because if you do insist on playing AKALI because you really do enjoy her, don't fall at the first hurdle. In the number 6 position we have QIYANA, who has the biggest divide in win rates from low elo to high elo out of any champion on this list. You simply never see QIYANA being picked at lower ranks, and if you do, they're probably not going to be impactful whatsoever. QIYANA is all about limit testing and one-shotting people, and to be honest, she overkills her enemies 99% of the time anyway. Learning all of those combos is one thing, learning all of your damage limits is another, and also learning how to actually keep yourself alive with your mobility and with your stealth element. As a melee mid laner, it's always going to be a little bit harder for you to get through that lane phase against ranged lane bullies as well, so understanding when and how you can kill people is going to be key so you don't just get bullied out and completely negated from playing the game. There's also a bunch of different mythics and builds you can go for depending on certain matchups, depending on certain drafts, and learning all of this is also far more reason why you shouldn't be picking her in low elo unless you've already learned all of these things. Now, a good QIYANA is one of the most satisfying things in the game to watch, and if you want to get good at her, then don't be afraid to give her a go. Just remember that it's going to take a lot more practice when you could just pick Annie, farm with Q, press R, and win the game that way. In the number 5 position, we're back down to the AD carries, and we've got EZREAL. EZREAL is a ton of fun to play. He's definitely one of my personal favourite champions in the game. He's so fun when you can kite back with those Qs, land those big ultimates, and combo enemies down with your Ws and your Es. EZREAL is one of the most popular AD carries in the game. He's a really safe pick to go for early on in the pick order, but his win rate shows that he's just not actually that great of a champion unless he's being played by the best of the best. Watching a high elo EZREAL one trick is like watching poetry in action. The constant Qs, the constant autos, the repositioning with your E, the cross the map ultimates, there's so much to enjoy, but actually in terms of general DPS, in terms of general impacts in fights, it's just so easy to not actually do anything on this champion. It starts off in the lane phase, you need to know how to poke with your Qs, you need to know how to farm efficiently so you can get those big power spikes, and then once you do have those 2 to 3 item power spikes, it's all about knowing your limits and jumping in, jumping out and dealing good damage at the same time. Let's put it this way, if you're not landing all of your skill shots consistently and relentlessly, then you're simply not going to deal any damage. And if you compare that to picking an auto attack based AD carry with decent range like Caitlyn, it's so much easier to be impactful for far less risk. So unless you're an absolute beast at landing those Qs consistently, farming up like a monster and dominating the mid game, EZREAL just isn't that great in low elo. Counting down to number 4 now, and yes, we have VIEGO. On first look, VIEGO really doesn't have the most complicated kit in the world. His Q is a little skill shot, his W is a little dash that stuns people, and his E is a stealth that increases his movement speed. Pretty simple. But every time you kill someone and possess their soul, you get control of their abilities, which means you need to have an amazing understanding of every other champion in the game. This also means that every single game is dynamic when picking VIEGO. Every single champion that you possess, you're going to need to know how to use them. So unless you've got 10 years experience or 5,000 ARAM games, you're probably not going to know every single champion inside and out. But it doesn't even end there with why VIEGO is difficult, because once you've claimed a soul and you've used those abilities, you need to know when to use that ultimate to get the next soul. And it also comes down to choosing the right soul to possess, because if you choose the wrong target like a Yuumi, you're going to do nothing in that teamfight. Now and again, you will have pop-off games on VIEGO, where you get a bit too fed early game, you run around the map killing everyone with your ultimate and having a great time. But being consistent, knowing those jungle clears, knowing the build paths, knowing the different options you can go for, knowing all the different abilities your enemies have, is just what makes VIEGO so much harder at low elo. In the number 3 position, we have YONE. YONE is that solo laner that everybody thinks they're a beast on, but in the matter of fact, he's pretty weak in the lane phase. He can get stomped super hard, and if he does get stomped, he's never going to be relevant whatsoever. Now, he is different to a lot of champions on this list in the fact that he's actually not that difficult to play. He's basically an easier version of Yasuo, and the only real difficulty is knowing your limits and knowing how to land your ultimate perfectly. But the real reason why YONE is on this list and so high up on this list, because he's so easy to put behind and he has so many difficult matchups. There are so many lanes that can just roll all over YONE and remove his ability to play the game whatsoever. And if YONE isn't fed and isn't strong enough to dive into teams and kill them in seconds, then he's simply not going to have much impact. Even more so if he can't 1v1 the enemy side laners. Speaking of side laners, number 2 is Zed. Zed has one of the highest ban rates and always has had one of the highest ban rates in low elo. But is he actually that good though? Well, the answer is he's pretty similar to everyone else on this video. If you're good enough on him, he's a really scary champion to play against. But the majority of people don't really understand how to actually play him properly. Even if you're against a Zed who gets really fed in the lane phase, quite often they'll throw their whole lead by jumping into a team and not even killing their desired target in the first place. Zed is an assassin, he's designed to kill carries, but he's not designed to teamfight. And in low elo, all people do is group up in 5-mans and ARAM as soon as the lane phase ends. This is not where Zed shines. Zed needs to get ahead in the lane phase, then he needs to set up shop in a side lane, roam around the map picking off individual isolated targets, and snowballing the game so no one can deal with him. He's so slippery that if he's good enough, he can never really die. He doesn't even need to trade 1-for-1 like most assassins do. But at lower ranks, people jump into a whole team of 5 people, get CC'd, and die instantly. If you do really want to get good at Zed in low elo, take a look at your macro rather than your mechanics. Just because you get ahead in the lane phase and 1v1 the enemy mid laner a few times doesn't mean you're having the maximum impact. Know when to rotate, know when to split push, know when to side lane, know when to group, know when to flank, and if you can learn all of these things, you'll have a much better chance of climbing out of low elo. In the number 1 position, we have the blind monk himself. We're back to the jungle with Lee Sin. Lee Sin has always been one of the most popular champions in the entire game. His games played every single patch is breaking records every single time. But when it comes down to his actual performance and his win rates and his success rates, they're not really that impressive. The higher ranks you go, the more people can utilize him, the more people can play him, and the more people can understand what he's actually good at. But in low ranks, people land that Q bump and grind comes on at full blast in their earphones, and before you know it, they've jumped into a team and died for no reason. Lee Sin has crazy amounts of combos he can do. He's got those ward jumps, he's got those insects, and there's so much you can pull off if you are good enough on this champion. But if you aren't that good, it's so easy to just not do anything on this champion. You might as well play someone else like Maokai, Amumu, Jarvan. Anyone like that can do so much more for such less risk. There is so much more to Lee Sin that meets the eye. He jumps in and out of fights with his mobility, he kicks people in, he kicks people out, he peels exceptionally well for his team as well with those shields and slows. And if you truly want to get good at Lee Sin, you need to understand how to play him throughout all stages of the game to maximize your effectiveness. If you insist on playing Lee Sin in low elo because you just have so much fun, then I'm not going to hold it against you. All I would say is spend some time in practice mode, spend some time in normals with your friends, learn the combos, learn the ward jumps, learn his damage limits, and then take them back into solo queue. And that brings us to the end of this video, all about the biggest bait picks to avoid if you're trying to climb out of low elo. If you did enjoy this video, then let us know in the comments, and if you'd like, we can prepare a video of completely the opposite, the 15 best low elo champions to play this season instead. Let us know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see, and we'll make it happen. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and just before you go, don't forget to check out our desktop app. There's just so much free content for you guys, which will almost definitely help you improve. And if you are interested in all these champions in this video's stats at different ranks so you can really see who's good and who's not, then you can see all of that over on our website.